Hi there, and welcome to this presentation of the Italian nationalism and the role of Austria-Hungary. This is part 2 of the two-part series. These are notes 11.4b, and this is of course Mr. Marks. Before I go on, just a note that I didn't mention on the last presentation. You'll notice the background of this one is slightly different than the last. The last one had the background of the vertical stripes of the red, white, and green of the Italian flag. These have the two horizontal stripes of the black and yellow of the Austrian-Hungary Empire. In order to understand the Austria-Hungary Empire, you have to understand the Habsburgs, who had been the ruling family behind the Austrian throne for generations. If you remember, this is the same group that brought Marie Antoinette to the throne of France. They had relatives and interconnected relations with most of the countries in Europe. This was a powerful and long-lived family that, during this time of nationalism, was starting to see its decline. They were in control of a multinational empire. Their empire, which had 50 million people in the mid-century, fewer than a quarter of them were German-speaking Austrians like the Habsburgs were. Almost half of them belonged to different Slavic groups. You think of Yugoslavia or the different nations, Bosnia and Serbia, which exists now, since Yugoslavia is no more. Some of these Slavic groups include the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Poles, the Polish people, the Ukrainians, the Romanians, the Serbs, the Croats, the Slovenes. Often these were rival groups that shared the same region. This will lead to conflicts that will actually lead us into World War I. This empire also included large numbers of Hungarians, and as I mentioned in the last presentation, Italians. The Habsburgs did not like nationalist demands. They wanted to rule an empire. And if you remember, nationalism largely focused a country together based off of their language. So German-speaking people were trying to form a united Germany. Italian-speaking people trying to form a united Italy. These Habsburgs ignored those demands as long as they could. In fact, Francis I would say, "Peoples? What does this mean? I know only subjects." So, nationalist revolts will start breaking out in the Habsburg Empire in 1848, and when they do, the government is going to crush them. One of the main people you need to know, one of the last in line of this Habsburg throne, this is what's going to lead us, like I said, into the beginnings of World War I, is a man named Francis Joseph. Francis Joseph took the throne when he was only 18 years old. Because he was young and inexperienced, he would end up granting a new constitution that would set up a legislature. But he still managed to make it so that legislature was dominated only by the German-speaking Austrians. And if you remember, that's only representing a quarter of your population. Well, a quarter of the Austrian population. These reforms, for that reason, didn't satisfy any of the other national groups that were a part of this empire. The Hungarians especially were determined to settle for nothing less than total self-government. When Austria is defeated disastrously in the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, there was renewed pressure for for change from the Hungarians. A moderate Hungarian leader, Francis Deák, helped to work out a compromise that created a new political power known as the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. A dual monarchy is when a single ruler rules two nations at the same time. And in this case, there would be a separate legislature, there would be separate tax structures, there would be separate laws, but both groups would pay their allegiance to one emperor, Francis Joseph. They would share ministers of finance, they would share ministers of defense and foreign affairs, so they could work as a group when they're dealing with other nations. But as far as eternal or internal issues, they were independent from one another. Hungarians loved this idea, but other subjects, these other nationalities that weren't Hungarian, didn't like it much at all. Here you can see the Austria-Hungary Empire. And you notice that part of it will include a region to the south, that brown region called Bosnia and Herzegovina. That region, you see Sarajevo is down there. That's going to be the powder keg that's going to change everything in the world. It's going to change warfare and everything of the sort when we move into World War I. I also want to point out on this map the capital of Austria, which is Vienna. You can see where that is. And the capital of Hungary, which is Budapest. You'll also see Krakow, Poland's capital. And so you've got a bit of Poland, you got some Russia, you've got Romania, you've got Serbia, you've got all these different places that are making this up. But the area to really look at when you're looking at the Austria-Hungary Empire is that border between Bosnia and Serbia. That is an area known as the Balkans. You see, the Ottoman Empire was failing, and as what was often termed the sick man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire, was falling apart, the other European powers were scrambling to take over the regions that it was leaving behind. Russia pushed south toward the Black Sea so that they could have a port there. They were trying to take Istanbul, which the Russians were still calling Constantinople. Austria-Hungary is going to take control of the provinces of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this action is going to anger the Serbs, who they were the ones who had wanted to expand into the area. Meanwhile, Britain and France are going to set their sights on other Ottoman lands in the Middle East and in North Africa. Basically, the Ottoman Empire is just kind of falling apart, and everybody's making this huge grab. And as they start coming in contact with one another, sparks are going to begin to fly. And this is the reason the Balkans are often known as the powder keg of Europe. You have a bunch of different nationalities, all of them seeking their own independence, and then a bunch of European nations which are trying to take over those places for their own sakes. All of these interweaving alliances and other sorts of problems are going to lead us to the war that would supposedly end all wars. It doesn't just start out all at once. World War I does not, while there is definitely a starting point for that war, it wasn't the beginning of conflicts in this region. The Russians have already at this point fought several wars against the Ottomans. France and Britain would sometimes join with the Russians, and sometimes they'd join with the Ottomans. Germany would, of course, support Austrian authority because they were German speaking over these other national groups, but Germany would also encourage the Ottomans because of their strategic location in the Eastern Mediterranean, and by supporting the Ottomans they could hold off the English and French from expanding too far. Meanwhile, the people inside the countries are revolting, and sometimes they're fighting against one another. This will all come to a head in 1914, and that is where we're going to start our next unit.